And it's much more enticing for the actors to be able to perform. I mean, I would love to be able to put everyone on stage, you know, and do it that way, as opposed to little tiny rooms where you want the actor to succeed and score.
England was still technically at war with Argentina when we got there, so my Argentinian counterpart took me to the main military army base where they manufacture all of their ordnance for the military. I suddenly found myself being driven through the main gates of the main Argentinian military base where all their explosives are, and I'm holding a British passport and we're at war with Argentina. And I suddenly got very nervous that I was going to get arrested as being a spy or something. But
there was a certain strange animosity between the two cultures in a way. And during lunch, bread fights started to happen, where bread was being thrown. But that got to a point where bottles started to get thrown. I think that's when someone said, like, cool it.
They used to play soccer on Sundays, and it would be the English crew versus the Argentine crew, and those got pretty exciting.
There was a lot of blood on the grass.
The British Empire being at stake. For what? 3 rocks. Give it back. Give the rocks to the Argentinian. Who cares? There's nothing on these rocks. Not even a penguin.
the economic problems of Argentina at the time we arrived were quite obvious. We arrived there at the end of October, and I think there were something like 575 Australis to the dollar. By the middle of February, it was 6,250 Australis to the dollar. The supermarkets would close, and you couldn't buy any food because they didn't know what price to put on the products that they were selling.
Every payday we would have guards with huge bags protected by men with submachine guns coming to the office and putting payments in envelopes because no one would take checks.
And at the very end, they would only take American cash. These same guys with the Uzis would be standing around a bridge table with stacks of $100 bills, all brand new. We never were quite sure exactly where they got them. And there were $400,000, $500,000 sitting on that table, and next to it were these duffel bags full of Australis, which was their money, which was almost worthless. So they had magic marker written on it. It would say 25 million, and that was Australis. If somebody would take Australis, you just give them these duffel bags full of stuff.
One of the ways I helped keep my department on budget was selling U.S. dollars. I had one of the people that I brought from the U.S. that would call me and say, I'm in a kiosk on Florida Street, we need 500 U.S. dollars, and we would get a good exchange rate that way, and that really helped me stay on budget.
I remember being in a bank at one point, and I'm at the end of this queue with my money ready to change it. And I see there's a clock up behind the bank teller, and I look at this clock and I think, goodness me, they've got seconds on this clock, it's really moving very fast. And this was in fact the exchange rate.
You were in a constant never land of not knowing where you were budget-wise because of this inflation aspect.
Peter and I would go down the street from the hotel to a soft ice cream place that was called Fredo. And we would have the Chiquito, the smallest ice cream cone. And as he would raise the prices to keep track of inflation, we didn't even have to look in the newspaper to see what the exchange rate was, because this guy was always so good that we started calling it the Bolsa Fredo, which means like the stock exchange Fredo. The guy was right on the money every time, every Saturday night.
The food was sensational. I mean, you know what a good steak is. Well, you haven't even tasted a steak until you've been to Argentina. I had my assistant, Albert Coleman, came down there, and he says, well, I don't eat much meat, he said. And I said, well, I think you're going to change your tune on that one, but first of all, you're not going to find too many millet loaf or vegetables on the menu anywhere, and once you taste those steaks, you're going to be going for it. We ate steak every night.
We actually built a model It gave us views and aspects of the set immediately and all the options that we had there. So all those options were apparent and they were quite detailed.
The model was very important to work out the strategy of the wires of who could fly where and do this aerial sort of battle sequence. It's all about geography, where the cameras are going to be, what are we going to see, and who's going to be where.
We constructed virtually all of the street. There were a couple of scrappy little buildings, one of which we did involve in the set a little bit, but mostly it was all built from scratch. The bridge, cinema, all of those things, catwalks, were all built. It was approximately a mile long, built in about 3 to 4 months.
This was a real porteño kind of set, you know. And that's what they call people from Buenos Aires. They're port people. And they're porteños and porteñas. And this was definitely a porteña kind of set. You know, it was right there by the water, a lot of mosquitoes.
The railway was in fact there, and we were very lucky to have that there, which is one of the main reasons we went there, because that was again a script requirement. We didn't want to have to build a railway line.
We needed a train because we needed to cut the guy's head off in the fight. There are 2 places maybe in Buenos Aires where there were train tracks that were possible. One was a fairly full place that could have been dressed to look somewhat like the street and would have cost about 20% as much. And the other was to find a place that just had the railroad tracks and to build this entire city around it.
So we decided to do the prudent thing and build the entire city.
Right. There was really no choice. Once we saw those drawings and then, you know, had a glass of wine at lunch, it was, don't cry for us.
We were able to discuss what we needed effects-wise to be built in, so that when we got to the explosion scenes and the destruction scenes and the flying scenes, we had all of our things already built in and allowed for. I got an idea of building a flying rig on the back of a pickup truck. It was a huge crane arm that you could swing round and round. You could hang somebody on the end of it, counterweight them. You could spin them on the end of it. You could drive the truck up and down the street so that you had the ability to fly somebody very fast along a street and then swing them round and fly them back the other way. It also meant you could get under structures or over structures by pivoting the crane arm.
A lot of rigging on the overhead wiring. It was like 10 feet off the ground. And then you had a harness coming down. Every 10 minutes, every 5 minutes when we'd make a shot, you'd hear this, and 40 guys were like football players pushing a sled. And they all had a hold of this big rope with knots in it, and they were running like hell to give him his momentum to take off and go.
Are the Lakers winning is what I want to know.
And I haven't seen any actors especially flying a block and a half, going 30 miles an hour, with skipping on top of cars with sparks and making turns in the air with these guys, the 2 aliens coming down.
Yes. Flying blades?
We developed a system where we ran wires down the legs of the guys that were actually doing the flying with elastic inside and outside of their legs so that they could actually put weight on the hoverboards. And when they lifted their legs, it would seem as though the boards were lifting them up. So it gave them a sort of organic look.
I was flying literally, so it was a lot of fun and very exciting. If you look at the movie, this is something I haven't seen yet done as well in any other picture. And it was a gamble because we didn't have the technology that we have today. It was new what we were doing, and it's great. I love that kind of stuff.
I nearly had to go back to my rock and roll video filmmaking, which was, you know, a bit of string and stick and cardboard and movie magic the old-fashioned way. In some ways, the first release of Highlander 2 is effects done the old-fashioned way.
There was no obstacle or no matting and backdrop stuff. This was actually shot and done the way it was. Very physical and very difficult. It was a masterpiece when it came to that type of work. I've never seen anything as good or better. Tying in cars and the city and the buildings, flying that low. These guys did a wonderful job photographing it and rigging it. That was one of 3 or 4 things in this movie I have never seen before, and I don't think I'll see again.